Good evening. Welcome to the Norton Board of Selectmen meeting. Today is Thursday, June 27th, 2019. Let the record show that 4 members of the board are present with Town Manager Michael Units. Would you all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. First order of business, licenses and permits. We have 5 beer and wine alcohol license applications to be used at the Everett Leonard Park throughout the summer. The chair will entertain a motion to approve all 5 of the beer and wine and alcohol licenses to be used at the Everett Leonard Park.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions? Okay. Ms. Steele?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Ms. Flaherty?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. Also, under licenses and permits, we have an application from Patricia Belden for the Susan G. Komen Impact Ride to be held on Saturday, September 28th, 2019. The start-off time is 7:30 a.m. to approximately 1:30 p.m., and it goes through multiple surrounding towns and down several streets in Norton. We've approved this in the past, and it's almost, it's technically a parade permit. So unless anyone has any questions, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the request.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Announcements. Mr. Conway?
This, right? Wheaton College is presenting Symphony Under the Stars. Great Wood Symphony Orchestra performs a concert of classical and pop's favorites with Associate Professor Delvin Case as the conductor, Thursday, August 8th, 2019, from 7 to 8 p.m. in the President's Garden. If it's rainy, it will be in the Weber Theater. Bring your blanket or lawn chair and relax. They will accept donations to the Covenant of Kindness Food Pantry, and they will be collecting canned goods before the start of the event. We also have the 4th annual Battle of East Main Street softball game, Wheaton College versus Norton's Fire and Police Departments, Tuesday, July 9th at 5 p.m. at Clark Softball Field. Join them for fun and food as you cheer on your favorite team. During the game, they will pass the hat for collections to support Norton's Fire and Police Departments. Wheaton College is putting that on. I believe that's it for announcements, unless I'm missing something.
Ms. Fire, do you have any?
I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
I also am all set. Next, we'll move on to appointments and resignations. Our first appointment is Janice Roberg as Principal Accountant Clerk in the Treasurer Collectors Department. And
Come on. Hi. For those who don't know me, I'm Catherine, the treasurer, and I'm just happy to announce that Janice is going to join our very short-staffed office. We've been mostly without someone for almost the whole year so far. It's already June, July. So Janice, Janice is going to start on July 8th, so she'll be the friendly face you're going to see as you come into my office. Right, Janice?
Thank you, yes.
So we're excited.
thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And I wish you good luck.
Yeah, welcome
Thank you.
aboard.
Mr. Conway, can you please read the notice of appointment?
Thank you, Mike. From Michael Units, Town Manager. I hereby notify the Board of Selectmen that, in accordance with the provisions of Article 4, Section 2B of the Norton Charter, acting in my capacity as appointing authority, I have appointed the following individual as Principal Account Clerk, Janice Roberge. Said appointment was made on June 24th, 2019, in accordance with the provisions of the Norton Charter, and will be effective June 9th, 2019, unless the Board of Selectmen votes to accept or reject the appointment prior to that date. I specifically request the Board's acceptance of this appointment with an effective date of July 8, 2019. Please advise if you have any questions.
Are there any questions? If not, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the appointment.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next two appointments we have deal with the fire department. I see the chief back there, so I know better than to try to speak over him.
Oh, on this side's fine, Sean. I'm trying to get Deputy Simmons used to being up here, you know? So I just want to thank you for allowing the fire department time here this evening to consider the promotion of two very qualified individuals. I'm working with Deputy Chief Simmons on the transition of the department, and we'll have some additional promotions for your approval in late July. I've requested that your August 22nd meeting take place at the Norton Cable Studio, where we have a little more room, and hopefully the AC will be cranking this time. If you remember Brad when we did the
Yes.
last batch. I also got some firefighters that have been on all over the year and needed to be sworn in. It'll be sworn in that evening as well. And lastly, I've received some years of service awards for firefighters that have been on with us for 20 years or more in 5-year increments, including two 40-year awards that we'll give out that night as well. So appreciate your indulgence in that and having the meeting move to that location. So do you want to do the official stuff first, or do you want to read a little bit about them first?
Read about them first.
Okay, so I'd like to have Captain Mike Wilson join me at the podium, please. So Captain Wilson started his full-time career in Norton on January 3rd, 1994. But he was actually on the call force starting in December of 1987, so he's been around for a few years. He dies this year. He is our current EMS director and has been serving in that capacity for many years. He is responsible for the training of the members on new regulations and any protocol changes, which, as you've heard me speak in the past, are very frequent and all-consuming. I've said it here before, but it is worth stating again. The talented men and women of the Norton Fire Department under Mike's leadership is why I truly believe that we are the best fire-based ambulance provider around, period. And again, I don't think there's anybody that holds a candle to the men and women of the Norton Fire Department, so very proud of that. What else? So at this time, hopefully I'll grant your approval for the appointment.
Please read it.
So from Michael Units, Town Manager, I hereby notify the Board of Selectmen that in accordance with the provisions of Article 4, Section 2B of the Norton Charter, acting in my capacity as the appointing authority, I have appointed the following individual as permanent full-time fire captain in the Norton Fire Department, Michael Wilson. The appointment was made on June 24th, 2019, and will be effective June 9th, 2019, unless the Board of Selectmen votes to accept or reject the appointment prior to said date. I specifically request the Board's acceptance of this appointment with an effective date of July 1st, 2019.
Do I
So
have a
moved.
motion? Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Lieutenant Chris Ferrara join me at the podium, please. So Lieutenant Ferrara started his full-time career on September 11th, 2006, and that didn't really ring a bell till I looked it up, because I thought that Butler was the only September 11th appointee, but no, you're not going to ever forget that date. But he was also a call firefighter in the town of Rainham, and I'm not sure how many years you were on over there, but 3 years over there. So again, there's a lot of time and talent here as well. Lieutenant Ferrara handles the testing and upkeep on one of our most important pieces of equipment, and that being our Scott self-contained breathing apparatus. And he's also been our dive team coordinator for quite a few years until recently. He's been doing a great job as an acting lieutenant since being put in that position on April 8th in 2018. Many times, his shift under his guidance is the first to complete assigned tasks, such as the building pre-fire plans, and that has been duly noted, Lieutenant. So, thank you.
From Michael Yunitz, Town Manager to Board of Selectmen. I hereby notify the Board of Selectmen that, in accordance with the provisions of Article 4, Section 2B of the Norton Charter, acting in my capacity as the appointing authority, I have appointed the following individual as a permanent full-time fire lieutenant in the Norton Fire Department: Christopher Ferreira. The appointment was made on June 24th, 2019, and will be effective on July 9th, 2019, unless the Board of Selectmen votes to accept or reject the appointment prior to said date. I specifically request the Board's acceptance of this appointment with an effective date of July 1st, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Well, I could go on and on, Mr. Yunitz, if you want me to speak about anything else while I'm here, or you're all set?
Mr. Chairman, Chief,
Oh, I didn't do it.
is this your last meeting with us?
No.
Oh, I'm going to be here in...
Why do you think he asked for the bigger venue on the 22nd?
July 1.
That's a combination of hopefully Deputy Simmons, but, no, so it won't be, but...
Okay, good.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, gentlemen.
Okay. Next appointment on our agenda is the appointment of a part-time recording secretary for the water sewer department.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This will be a new position at the Water and Sewer Department. It would be strictly a recording secretary for their meetings. And the recommended applicant is Kevin Bernardo. Kevin right now works in the as a health agent and has been involved in the type of work that the Water and Sewer Department does, so he understands the terminology and will be able to help them out in doing the minutes so that full-time staff is not doing the meetings and receiving comp time off in lieu of that. So I recommend the appointment effective July 8th, their next meeting.
So moved. Nope, so we haven't done the motion yet, sorry.
I got to read it. From Michael Yunitz to Board of Selectmen, hereby notify the Board of Selectmen that, in accordance with provisions of Article 4, Section 2B of the Norton Charter, acting in my capacity as appointing authority, I have appointed the following individual as recording secretary: Kevin Bernardo. Said appointment was made on June 24th, 2019, in accordance with the provisions of the Norton Charter, and will be effective July 9th, 2019, unless the Board of Selectmen votes to accept or reject the appointment prior to that date. I specifically request the Board's acceptance of this appointment with an effective date of July 8th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And our final appointment is, we have a request from Mr. Ralph Stefanelli to be appointed as an alternate member to the Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District. Stefanelli, do you want to say a few words?
Only if it's a no.
No. Chair will entertain a motion to approve Mr. Stefanelli, who for, I don't know how many years, but for many years was our representative to Serpent, and I'm sure would be a plus to have there to continue to represent our interests.
Miss-
So move for discussion?
Well, I think we have to make a motion and then discussion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Now, any discussion?
So I understand that we have another appointment made by the planning board that is maybe not perhaps as active, which would be a voting, as opposed to the alternate where we're, so right now with these Serpent meetings, we're only getting one vote as opposed to two. Is that correct, Mike?
No.
Oh, it's not, okay.
Not that I know of. I mean, we have a planning board rep, we have JTPG rep,
Mm-hmm.
and we have our town rep, which
Sandy
is
Oliverhead.
the position.
Yeah, well, I knew that Sandy had it, but I thought we also had another appointed position from the planning board, but it might have been less inactive.
No,
Okay.
not that I know of.
Well, you said there was somebody from the planning board, but they don't have a individual vote. We still only have one vote as a town?
Right.
Do you know of anything, of any clarification on that, Mr. Stefano? Do you know of that?
They have two people, they have two shots. They have the director and then a member who is a member of the planning board.
That's Steve Hornsby.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if Steve is voting, is the
That's
planning
what-
board member a voting member?
Absolutely. Serpent, of course. Sure. Tabitha did it. You
And I can vote on the Joint Transportation Planning Committee as well as the Regional Economic Committee.
You're representing the town.
Okay.
Excuse me.
That's,
Chair.
that's all right. I'm looking for input only because
Well,
we-
we've got Serpent here, so.
we just want to make sure that,
You're on, especially when it represents the town. There's no conflict with transportation and being on Serpent itself.
No,
No.
you can be the JTPG representative and the survey commission representative.
oh,
That's how the town
No
functions.
conflict.
we weren't looking for that. All we were concerned was that we were under the impression that we have a selectmen's representative.
Right.
And we thought that there was possibly a planning board representative who also could vote, so that there would be two votes from Norton. And we wanted to make sure that instead of putting you as an alternate to, who would not have a vote, that we weren't wasting a slot.
Okay.
But
Review.
Yes, please.
the planning board has filled that position.
In 2000, Ralph Stefanelli, 12 James Street, in 2017, 18, there was competition for the selectman's representative.
Correct.
I happened to win that election. It was a close one, but we won. I then sat down and said, whoa, why would we overlook a good person like Sandy? And I came to the mic and said, let's make sure that we can create and use the alternate position. And as soon as I get approval from Serpent through Jeff Walker, yes, it was available. I informed Mike. He in turn asked Sandy, and she became the alternate, which is the kind of backup you want on these important committees. You want somebody who could be in the wings. Sandy was in the wings for a year. It came up this year, and I said, whoa, I'm not putting my name in. Let her take it. Let her have full capacity as the selectman's rep. So I'm here tonight to say I will then step back and take the alternate position. So the town's represented no matter what.
Okay.
So that's where the vote tonight stands, as an alternate to Serpent. If she's not there, I get voting power.
Okay.
Okay? That's all. The town will be represented on all important decisions that the town is moving in the right direction, and we want to make sure that these things are covered and that you're informed. There's a lot going on in town.
Yeah.
You're going to hear from the center committee and everything else. That's all Serpent. That didn't just come out of the air. When we were on, no, too much talking.
Okay.
Done.
Ms. Steele?
Appreciate your vote.
Mr. Chairman, last year I was actually one of the selectmen that voted for Sandy to be the Serpent rep because I felt that she was the best person, the best candidate at the time. And I do believe she's going to be a great candidate for us this year in the full capacity. But I also do recognize that you are more than qualified and you are very interested in volunteering to continue to be part of the board as an alternate. And I also recognize that it was your suggestion last year that created the alternate position in order for Sandy to be a part of that group. So this evening, I'm going to vote in your favor.
Okay. So I'm trying to, we've made a motion. We have a second. We're discussing it. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of naming Mr. Stefanelli as the alternate to the Serpent indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, so it's 3-1.
Through the chair,
Yes.
I would like to ask Mr. Conway why.
Happy to have this conversation with you publicly or privately.
Publicly is okay.
Okay. I have a difficult time recommending someone for a position that represents the community at large when they were harshly reprimanded by the state for campaign finance issues and the manner in which they dealt with that complaint. So I think there's no doubt your commitment to the community of Norton. However, when we think about who we want to represent the community's interests, I think having someone that was so forcefully direct with the inspector from the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, I think that's a hard sell for me.
That was a private matter. And part two, so you're in favor of a kangaroo court, which is where you're coming from. And I disagree with you. That was a private matter. Had nothing to do with Serpent. And yet you jumped on it, and you're creating a kangaroo court. No trial, no jury, only the hangman. Enjoy your votes. Now you can see why the town is sliding under the new direction of Conway.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Stefanelli.
Sorry about that, Mr. Conway. At 7:15, we have a public hearing for petition from Mass Electric regarding pull box. Please come forward.
Albert
And-
Galvin, Design Engineer, National Grid.
Okay. Why don't you tell us, in layman's terms, what you want to do, and
There was two accounts. This is the pull box account we're talking on Newland.
That's the first one, yep.
That's the first one? Okay. So this one, yeah, we had an outage at that riser pole leading into that development. So in order to have proper drainage at the bottom of the pole, where the underground conduits come up the pole, they install a pull box there, fill it with stone, so anytime, especially during the winter, when you get freeze up and build up and then it melts and things like that, so that the stone can disperse it and make sure there's no damage to those lines, so we don't come into an outage situation in the future. So that was what we installed to improve those matters.
okay. Any questions from the members of the board? Anyone here regarding this? Seeing none, Chair will entertain a motion to approve the petition of Mass Electric, Massachusetts Electric Company doing business as National Grid to install a pull box over the existing conduit for drainage to minimize ice buildup in conduits at riser pole 1959-71 and improve reliability for the neighborhood.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now, the second one is Smith Street pole.
Yes, that was a town request to do some tree removal, and as it turns out, we had one of our old tree guy anchors in the tree, so it was asked that we get that removed. But in order to maintain stability on the pole lines, we had to install a stub pole.
Okay.
So now the pole is the support instead of the tree guy. So,
Anyone have any questions? Seeing none, Chair will entertain a motion to approve the petition of Massachusetts Electric Company doing business as National Grid and Verizon doing business as Verizon New England to install Smith Street pole number 2052-84 and installing pole and anchor to remove a tree guy supporting existing Smith Street pole 2052.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All set. Mr. Unit.
Just yesterday, National Grid had their Southeast Region safety hearing for all the towns, and they did recognize Officer Cameron for his actions on the day that the tragic event happened about 5 weeks ago now. And another thing they mentioned is that in this region, they've taken down I think it was like 400 dead oak trees this year. They're being active and trying to, and the gypsy moss, 2 years of gypsy moss have just destroyed so many oak trees that they had to take 400 dead ones down this year.
I remember years ago, when my daughters were now around 40, when they were young, we used to go up to the World War I Memorial Park up in North Attleboro. And most of the foliage up there is oak trees. And while swinging my daughters on the swing, you could actually hear, it sounded like the chomping, but actually it was probably the, I'm trying to think, excrement of the caterpillars as it was falling from the, that's how infested it was. It was incredible.
It was bad, yeah.
But you're all set, and
Great.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have the Town Center Study Plan presentation.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, I'm Paul DiGiuseppe. I'm the Director of Planning and Economic Development. First, I want to thank you all first for having me here to present this, but also to help, that you all supported us moving forward in the beginning to do this important project. It's this type of support that really helps keep things going forward. And what I want to present tonight are the findings of this report. And first, Mike, do we have a remote clicker to forward this, or
No.
could I borrow this? Yep. Okay, thank you.
To full screen.
Okay. And my apologies, just want to get this so everyone can see it. This is actually the same presentation we just made last week to the planning board, which actually endorsed the plan, which actually fulfilled the terms of the grant that we had with the state office, Executive Office of Energy Resources, maybe getting that wrong, but it was a pretty sizable grant that we received from them. So really, there are two main things I want to go over tonight. Two main takeaways is what's in the content of this report, and then the steps that are recommended, some of the steps recommended in the plan to actually make this report happen. So we had, now this plan did predate me, so I want to give some accolades to my predecessor, Tabitha Harkin, who was actually the person who initiated this, had it launched, and oversaw quite a bit of it before she left, and then I became the director. I know there were 4 bullet points here, but as I look at this, I think there were really 2 main objectives of this plan, of this report. One was looking at the mobility challenges of this area, and I should point out, the area we're talking about is our town center, right? Essentially where 140 and 123 come together. Although 140 doesn't come together so cleanly. And that created some of the mobility problems. As we know, in the mornings and in the evening, traffic backs up past this building, heading toward Attleboro, and Mansfield, or Taunton Ave and Mansfield Ave have similar problems. But they also have problems if you're trying to cross it on foot or by bike. So those were things, that we knew and that we've heard quite a bit of. Our consultant team did a lot of research into this. The other aspect that we wanted to look at was really the look and feel and how people experience this place. As you know, there's some good bones in it, but overall it just doesn't work. When you think about great places that work, yesterday I was up in Foxborough at the roundabout up on 140. It's not perfect, but it has a lot of shops there, and we saw people around. Saw a lot of cars trying to move around there too. Not so quickly, but this area just seems to have, there's a technical planning term called no there, and this kind of is still in that fashion where there's just kind of no there. It's mostly just a pass-through, and yet when you start looking at this area, this won't tell you, but people know this area, there's actually a lot of nice things in it. First of all, we have Wheaton College, which is an incredible amenity. We also have a lot of nice local businesses in this area. We have a great brewery, we have great restaurants, and then there are town amenities from the town hall to the library square, the schools. These are great amenities, but they just don't seem to connect well. And the plan wanted to look at that, and public was very concerned about that. But this was the focus area, as you can see. And those circles represent quarter-mile distances. And typically, why we put quarter-mile distances is quarter-mile is the distance people will walk. If you're healthy, you can walk a quarter-mile. If the conditions are safe and if they're interesting, people will walk, they'll bike. Half-mile is about the outer limit of most people's interest of walking. But you can see the different amenities within in the places within Library Square. So what I'm going to say about the process was it was really driven by public input. What went into that report, what you see in the report, is what the public told us. And so I'll do my best to try to capture that here. We did things like online surveys, which actually had quite a bit of success, and we had a series of meetings, and then I know a lot of you remembered when we put the posters up of those four alternatives. We had them here, we had them at one of the town meetings. That was a way that people would gather. If you remember at that town meeting, we had a lot of people before the meeting and after the meeting putting dots on the scenarios. And so the plan itself, it really focuses on a few things. This is not a regulatory document, it's really just a vision document, but it captures what we heard from the people and makes recommendations of what we could do. It's not a document that if we have a project that comes along, we can say, you're inconsistent or consistent with it. There are things we have to do in our regulations and so forth to make that happen. Our consultants focused a lot on the Library Square intersection, and then it looked at the development regulations and specifics like that. Focus was on that also to see what we could do to try to promote the type of development the public told us they'd like. And ultimately, what the people told us can kind of be succinctly stated as a more walkable, bikeable place there. And so that's sort of the focus of it. But I want to just go over briefly, or however, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. The next few slides I'm going to show were those alternatives. So when we were looking at the intersection, and as you know, the big issue here is the offset of 140 when it's Taunton Ave versus Mansfield Ave. And so what we did was we put these posters up and the public weighed in on it, but what we did was we tried to assess what the positive and negatives of each of these outcomes were. And so we had four alternatives, but the first one that we put out there is the no change option, which is the baseline, what we have out there now. And with every choice you have, there are pros and cons with it. And we know if we stay the same course of what we have now, we're going to have the same challenges, but the same opportunities too. The traffic won't get any better. It'll probably get worse. We'll have, it'll still be a difficult place to walk and bike, but the historic character will remain intact, and that's certainly a benefit. There's still development opportunities now that won't change, and then finally, the ease of implementation. Well, if we're not changing the way the road's configured, well, that's it's a fairly simple implementation. What I'm going to show you now is the next alternative we looked at. But if you keep an eye on Taunton Ave, you'll see a shift. And what this option showed, this is if we were to shift Mansfield Ave over to align with Taunton Ave, what would happen? And just a few things. A few years back, Serpide did a traffic study in this area, and they determined that if this alignment, or if this intersection improvement were made, we would save, if we were, I'm going to kind of hedge on the numbers right now, but if we're waiting at rush hour 10 minutes to come from this building to the intersection, it might knock off 4 or 5 minutes. It was a pretty substantial improvement. As far as getting around by walking and biking, it would be a neutral to positive change. You'd still have a big intersection to cross, but as a pedestrian, it's still easier to cross this than what we have right now. One of the big challenges, though, that would happen is when we look at the impacts to the historical area, you would be looking potentially at, or having to acquire several buildings, would take a section potentially of the church site. And then ease of implementation. Well, to construct a new road and the acquisition of land, that's obviously a pretty big deal. The next option we looked at is actually now aligning Mansfield Ave to Taunton Ave. So the transportation, it's the same as what we saw with option B, but, and then also the same with the biking. However, the historic impact shift, because this option, it shows it now going through the existing park. But you would also be gaining new land that could be used for parkland. In addition, that you could potentially have access roads to a couple of the buildings, including the old library, which could include some parking there that could be useful in the future. Again, building a new road, dealing with a historic district, those are challenges. They're not all insurmountable, but they're challenges that we need to deal with. And then finally, the option that we had come up with is what we called the pinwheel. It's sort of like the roundabout. And you can see here where, just as a difference between the Mansfield option here, it looks more like a roundabout around the park. But you could see now the park would be impacted, although you could open up some land with this option along Taunton Ave. There are benefits. This is primarily more of a benefit to bicyclists and pedestrians, because this would be, unlike a roundabout, this would have controlled with lights or signs or something that would slow the traffic. Now the public voted, provided us surveys on this, and it was kind of a toss-up between the Taunton option and the Mansfield option. Again, now what that tells us is, for next steps, we're really going to have to try to get some grant funding to bring in, hire a consultant to do the engineering work, to do more detailed engineering designs and cost estimates to help us figure out, can any of these actually be engineered to actually work, and what are the preliminary costs of that, and look at the traffic analysis, a detailed traffic analysis of each of these to see, are they really feasible? These options that I showed, they weren't drawn at an engineering scale. It was really more of just a conceptual to try to rethink this intersection. So there's a lot of work to be done. This is the long-term approach. I mean, honestly, if we are to be successful, if we were to see things happen here, we're still talking about 7, 8 years, 9 years before any of these other options, other than what we already have, will happen. And I just want to be, very honest about that. This isn't something that can happen overnight, as you know. But one of the things that we think we can do at a much quicker quicker pace is we've come up with a draft. This is a draft. It's not, again, this is just in a report, but a new village commercial district, zoning district, that, if approved, we would put in the bylaw. It would have to obviously go through town meeting and be there, but What we're trying to do is create land use regulations in our bylaws that would promote the types of walkable, compact places that people talked about. So when you look at today's village commercial district, you'll see that it's roughly in about 6 different areas. And it covers even more context than that. And our district is, the district itself, the bylaw is written, I think, to try to capture, it's kind of a one-size-fits-all. But it doesn't really fit here. It might work in a couple of other areas, but in this district, if people are trying to promote that walking, this district allows too much of some things that we probably don't want. And so what we're proposing would be, if we were to apply it, it would be in areas that are already zoned, a new district, it would be on areas that are already zoned village commercial. And so there's couple things we want to look at when it comes to the bylaws, one of which is, what are the uses you want there or don't want there? So, like for residential, we'd want, duplex, multifamily, or mixed-use buildings, right? You see residential on top of commercial building, on top of a retail store, maybe a cafe. But there are uses right now in the village commercial list that we probably don't want there. Those that are auto-centric, gas station, a repair shop. I mean, you may be walking away from a repair shop, but you drove there and you hopefully are driving away, but you're not, those aren't the types of uses that people are going to be using as primarily for walking reasons. So things like cafes, restaurants, offices, those types of uses that people could walk to as far as non-residential types of uses. Our dimensional requirements, those are things like how big the lot size has to be or your setbacks. Village commercial right now is still the best way I can say it is, it still promotes buildings being far away from one another. And what we're trying to do is get buildings closer together, because the more things that are closer together, the more people will walk to get to a place. So, not with getting into too many of the technical details, there are standards that we think we can change that'll keep the character the same, because a lot of those buildings would not meet today's zoning bylaw. They're non-conforming, and they're some beautiful buildings that work well, and our bylaw makes them non-conforming. So we'd like to change those to promote, again, a more compact and where buildings are closer together. We also want to pay closer attention to, and this is really critical, what goes on between the street and the front of the building. This is so crucial. What you see and what happens in that spot really is a big deal. Again, think about those great places that you love walking at, along the Cape or, even in Boston. That matters a lot. Parking is also a big deal. For one, this isn't on our list, but one of the things we'd really like to do is not allow parking right in the front of the building. Again, that frontage is huge. When the first thing you see is a giant parking lot, that tells you, don't walk here, just drive here. And if that's what we want, that's fine. But again, what we heard from the public was we really want more of those traditional New England downtowns. We'd also like to really look at our parking requirements. What we're proposing is eliminating the parking minimums. They would still provide parking, but instead they would give us a parking study to justify the amount of parking that they're asking for. In some cases, our parking is too much. And so why give we'd have to have them go through a variance. And again, if it's the right project in the right place, let's make it as easy of a process administratively as possible. And the same is true with signage. I mean, this is a great image because it tells you can easily see which one's meant for a person walking by and which one's meant for a motorist. These details matter. really don't want to add much with that, but again, it's trying to provide a more focus on the human aspect of this really great place, a historic place. But instead of having the design guidelines that we currently have, we'd really like to have standards. And that's my presentation, if anyone has questions.
Anyone have any questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So what's when you're talking about the vision, and what's the time frame that you're contemplating to get to this point?
To which aspect?
So, all of it. When would we start moving in that direction? How long would it take?
Well, a lot of these plans are, you hope you fulfill these within the 10 to 20-year period. My hope is, again, we talked about how long the intersection changes could take. I'm hopeful, Mike, that with the zoning districts, the district we just showed you, I may be getting a little aggressive, but I'd really like to get this at the fall town meeting. If not, then next year. But what I would recommend is get both the bylaw, the new district, and do the rezoning at the same time, so people can see it, see where it's happening. It'd give them more of an illustration. So, and once that's in effect, it's in effect. And I think I've neglected to point out, as you all know, that this sewer's going into this area starting this summer. So I'd rather get ahead of all of that. I think it's really critical, and if we can get ahead of it and start to promote the types of uses that people said they would like to see, then I would like to be more aggressive. But I also realize it's a challenge. I mean, we're a two-person shop. Right now, I'm one person for the next 2 months. So, and we have other priorities. When site plans and special permits come in, I have to make sure that we meet the requirements to get those done. So, but I'd really like to shoot for the fall. Oh, and yeah, I apologize. I failed to. Bob was a very important part of this. Bob, certainly in his role when he was on the board, but he was also a very active stakeholder member and really pushed hard and had a lot of great ideas. So,
Not necessary, but thanks. I am your representative, and just wanted to clarify a couple of things. I think your question was, basically, where do we go from here?
Mm-hmm.
Planners are going to do their job. We had a conversation with them a couple of weeks ago. They know exactly what they need to do. From this point on, you have a choice. You can either take this thing and throw it on a shelf, or you can try to come up with a creative way. Now, being road commissioners, this is basically falls under your hat. So the Board of Selectmen need to decide which direction you want to go in for a number of reasons. Paul mentioned the sewage, which is a big concern of ours. It's going to entirely change the whole design of that center. But obviously, option A is not, it's what it is not going to work. We know that. But most probably believe B and C are probably the two only options that could possibly work. D with a roundabout, don't see that happening either. But B, C, and D options all involve a number of things. When we did East Main Street and did the development of East Main Street, we had to come up with the money for engineering, concepts, all this stuff in advance. Board of Selectmen are the only ones that can take land. So depending on which plan we come up with, whether it be B, C, or D, all three involve taking of land, which means we not only have to take it, but we have to pay for it. So that's another problem. This is not a Norton problem. This is a regional problem, in my opinion. Attleboro, Easton, Taunton, Mansfield, Foxborough, wherever you're coming from. This is a crossroads. It's going to cost a lot of money, depending on which option we go with. But if we sit back and wait for it to happen, it's not going to happen. My recommendation would be, as your representative, would be to enlist the help of your state senators, representatives, and make this a regional issue. Don't make it a Norton issue, make it regional. That intersection is classified as an F. It's one of the worst in the area.
Everyone knows it. I was around when we put in the traffic lights. It was an F then, it's still an F today. It didn't help. It probably made matters worse if you talk to certain people. So before we start doing all this new zoning, sewerage, improvements, the village concept is a great idea. The new BCC is a great idea to develop an area. If you're able to look at B and C, you'd notice that actually a B, which is the one that goes right by the church, it involves taking probably 3 or 4 properties. It's probably going to be the most expensive.
Yeah.
You look at C, going through what I consider my new effort to improve the town common as the chairman of the committee, goes right over my new wall on top of everything else. So the problem is that we've got to come up with a plan that makes sense. Actually, the one going through the common is probably going to be the least least costly. That would be the cheapest. There would be some land taking. Wheaton College would own the land. They're actually enjoying the benefit of that because it would open up the space in front of the old library, create some parking spaces they don't have. It would increase green space. The Historic District Commission would have a whole different story on how that would play out. But I think it's important that everybody understand that, to answer your question, Mike, it starts here, and you guys have got to do something and get it going.
Yep.
And if it's 7 years, I'm not optimistic. If it's 10 years, maybe. How many years did it take us, Mike, Eunice, how many years did it take us to get East Main Street? We're told 5. I don't think it's been 5. I think it's been more than 5, probably 7. So, again, I don't think the town should bear the cost of all this. I think the regional concept has to be brought into it. And I do believe, I'd recommend you guys that you work with whoever you have to work with, Serped or whoever's out there can help you to make this happen. But also keep in mind, and everybody out there has to know from this day forward, anything we do is going to cost the town some money. We're going to have to buy land. No matter what we do, we're going to have to take it, we're going to have to pay for it. So we'll put that right out in front, so everybody's perfectly clear that's what's going to happen. But I think, the Serpent did a great job. The engineering firm that we brought in did a terrific job. Paul was a big help, in getting this thing put through. And I know that the planning board is very, very much in favor of working on getting the new commercial district together as soon as they can, before everything else starts happening. But I would encourage the Board of Selectmen to do the same and start working on the street details and see what you can come up with, because it's going to be a long process. It's going to cost a lot of money. So, and I honestly don't feel we have to pay for all of it.
Yep.
I think we can go out and get what we have to get. Thank you.
Big private donation from you, Bob.
What's that?
Big private donation from you.
Yeah, I'll work on it.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
And I hope I didn't imply that we would be responsible for the state road, but, yeah.
One of my concerns, Mr. Kimball brought up, is the Historic Commission, District Commission, is, I know how difficult they had trying to just put the fence around the town common. And I can't imagine they're going to look favorably upon changing the location of streets. It's going to be a battle.
Right, well, that was recognized immediately and by a lot of people,
Yeah.
right? That's why we identified it as a trade-off.
Right. And I would assume that the majority of the village commercial would be basically, after sewerage is in, most of the residential houses along West Main Street probably being turned into commercial locations, either by tearing them down and being rebuilt, because of what's there. It's not like there's open space.
Right, and we would need to work with the property owners to see if they would agree to that. I mean, the sewer going in is certainly going to be a factor that any property owner will take into consideration. We were just thinking of looking at the property zoned as village, already as village commercial. Some are residential properties.
Right.
So We'll just need, obviously, when we're going through the rezoning, we will work with the property owners to see if they're in concurrence with it. But, we view this as, an opportunity for people. It's more flexibility. It may give them more flexibility with their property. Maybe it raises values, But, we'll obviously reach out if we, when we start to move forward with rezoning, we will reach out to all the property owners and get their input with it.
Does anyone else, Mr. Conrad?
So if we have any prospective people going in on West Main Street in the proposed new village commercial core or village center core, before the zoning changes take effect, and if we're able to get those in place at the fall town meeting, do they still get held to the existing standards now?
Yes.
Or do they have the opportunity to revert?
If they had received approvals now, we would still have to uphold them, but they would have the option of building under the new standards then, sure. Yes.
Anything else? I mean, I recognize that none of the traffic patterns are probably perfect, and that it's definitely going to take more study. But I think basically it's something that the town has to look into. So I believe the planning board has already approved moving forward with this, and if the board is comfortable with endorsing it, we could take a vote to endorse the concept of the plan and to move forward with trying to get grant money for engineering and to further the study. Or we could take no action at all. It's pretty much the pleasure of the board. So if people are interested in moving forward, they've typed up a nice little motion for me so that I can read it. So, the Board of Selectmen has reviewed the Norton Village Center Plan dated June 11th. We find the plans provide a viable path forward and commit to working with the staff towards its implementation. We also recognize this plan will be a valuable resource for the upcoming update to the master plan, and therefore the chair would entertain a motion that the board officially endorses this plan and considers it to be part of our work plan moving forward.
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Does Jen have a copy of that?
No, I read it, I'm sure she got every word of it. I'll make sure she gets it. Okay. Now, review to vote on the pilot agreement between the town of Norton and Next Grid Patriots LLC. Yes. Hello, how are you doing? Good evening.
I'm Haskell Rowland with Solar Design Associates. We are the engineering firm representing Next Grid Partners. We are proposing a photovoltaic system on 54 Plain Street, and we're asking for a vote on the pilot.
Mr. Unit, please.
The pilot, as presented, was developed with NextGrid, working with the Assessors Department, and the Board of Assessors has brought forward the pilot recommending $20,000 a year for 20 years or $400,000. And this was approved at town meeting to authorize you to sign.
Does anyone have any questions or concerns?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Units, this is the one right beside the LG, right?
Yes.
Right. The issues with the playground taken care of?
I don't know. I have not heard anything further on the playground. Last I heard, they were doing some clearing out there, and I don't know if they have any agreement with the schools on the playground.
The last I heard was that to put language into this document dictating the building of a playground is illegal.
Oh.
It's almost like extortion.
Almost.
Not being a lawyer, but that was my understanding, that, it would be possibly, they might have to go after the first $20,000 in funds as capital improvement or something to that effect. But that to put it into the agreement would not be a wise legal maneuver.
So does that mean that's you and Joe, Dr. Vita have to work
Right.
with that?
The last that we had talked back about this back before the planning board approved the project, was that they wasn't an agreement on how much money would go towards the playground. So rather than work that out, it was they were going to take the first year off the pilot. I said, well, why would you do that? Just leave it in the pilot, and then the schools will come to capital and apply and get the $20,000 that way.
Any other questions?
So I think the last time this came up, there was discussion of an offer of a $370,000 lump sum in lieu of the $20,000 per year. Is the recommendation still to do the $20,000 per year?
Right.
Any other questions? Concerns? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the agreement for payment in lieu of taxes between the town of Norton and Next Grid Patriots LLC.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is the Municipal Vulnerability Planning Training Presentation by Mr. Bill Tano from Serpent.
You say municipal vulnerability much better than I can.
Oh. That's because I'm much more vulnerable than you are.
Well, yeah, that's what it's all about. Hi, I'm Bill Napolitano. I'm the Environmental Program Director at Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District, SERPED. I've heard our agency's name several times tonight. That's because we've had the opportunity to work with the town of Norton quite a bit in the last few years. And it's always been a good experience. And I'm sorry that my colleague couldn't make it tonight. Jen Carlino took ill and couldn't be here. She was your local coordinator for this Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant. And just a quick show of hands, I know there's a few people here. How many people actually came to that say, yeah, I remember, that's right. We had a really good turnout. And again, Paul mentioned the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. That's who he was searching for when he said you got a grant. The Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant Program is actually administered by the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. I had worked with Jen to put together a grant, and yours was very unusual. In fact, SERPED did the only two regional MVP, it's called MVP for short, grants in the state last year, and both were funded. We worked with Norton and Mansfield, and later on the town of Easton jumped in, and we worked with Lakeville, Rochester, and Freetown. And the commonalities, I thought it made a lot of sense. You guys shared the Canoe River Aquifer, and the other three towns shared the Assawamsett Ponds. One being EPA-designated sole source aquifer, and the other one being the largest natural reservoir in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So what does the grant do? The grant, the handout that I've given you tonight, it'll sum up what we did with the grant in the first place. The Executive Office of Environmental and Energy Affairs, and I'll call it EEA, it's like saying SERPED out of that. What EEA wants to do is give money to the towns to help them plan to look at where they're vulnerable to natural climate-related events. You know, wind, rain, intense storms, heat, cooling, seasonal change, the whole bit. And I'll tell you right off the bat before we get into it, we've mentioned plans tonight and sometimes how they take 7 years, 5 years, 10 years, and you look at things like master plans, open space plans, even your village district plan. The MVP program is probably the most organic program that I have ever worked with, and I've been at this for about 33 years, because we come in and we plan with you. It's a plan with you, not at you. I work with the Nature Conservancy, Mass Audubon, and the Manomet Center for Conservation Sciences. We're all trained and certified MVP providers. You have to go through that with the state. And we come in and facilitate and actually extract the local knowledge from you. Now, the whole team that I work with, we take every planning document that exists for Norton, and I'm lucky. I have access to most of them because we've been involved in most of them, but my team also reads them to see what Norton's done, how Norton's prepared, for vulnerability awareness, climate change, things like that, natural disaster planning, hazard mitigation planning. So we go in having an idea of what you've done, but then we've assembled a team, a core team, which is mostly your municipal staff. We sat down with them before we actually went into the workshops and said, what are the issues in Norton? What are the hot points? What do you have to deal with as different department heads or different department staff if they came? So we got, again, a deeper dive into Norton. These are the issues. Then we sent out invitations. We had a great response from your municipal staff. The utilities were there. That's why I was actually pleased to see the gentleman tonight who came from the electric utility, because they also sent a representative to our workshops, which was kind of unheard of in the Commonwealth. A lot of the power companies didn't want to come to the vulnerability workshops because everybody was saying, every time the tree goes down, my power goes out for 10 weeks. And, I'd love to see the people who are responsible for this. They came, and they talked about some of the things that that gentleman was talking about tonight, actually looking at trees that, should be removed, and doing an assessment of the power grid, but not just based on what they have for the power infrastructure, but what's beside it, what exists beside it that could be a threat to it. So that's what we were doing. We're taking a deep dive into the things that really could influence Norton. And we didn't tell you, these are the things you have to watch out for. So what you have in your handout is a summary of the report. And the top 4 things that came up, and it was consensus of the group, the hazards that they felt that Norton was most vulnerable to: flooding, number 1, and flooding's been an issue. I know I've worked with Jen, I've worked with the highway department before on these things. High wind, and you guys experienced a severe high wind problem there. Drought, fire, and extreme temperatures, and they're all kind of related. In fact, the flood-drought cycle, as we went into the workshop, we kind of figured out the flood-drought cycle really influences a lot of what the other problems are. And then changing seasonality. And people, when we introduced that concept, we said the growing season has increased by 11 days in the last century. So what does it do? Everybody thought, oh, you can plant earlier, harvest earlier. I said, no. If you've noticed, a lot of people said at the same time, well, what's happened to the spring? We don't have as much spring as we used to. Well, it's stretched out in one direction, and it's stretched out in the other. I've done this in agricultural communities, and some people said, I couldn't plant as early as I usually do, and I couldn't get my last cutting of hay in because it was too wet. So these are the things you have to look at, and how does it influence everything else? Tree growth, forests, soils, the whole bit. So we looked at that. I'll give you a quick summary of this because it could go on for a long time. We actually did 2 4-hour workshops, and again, to your credit, the municipal staff worked together so well in these workshops. We broke them up and made sure that a lot of people who don't usually work together actually sat together. And it really helped us come up with a good profile of the community and consensus. So flooding was the number 1, and they said currently flooding's experienced at multiple locations. This came up in both groups. We divided up into 2 groups of 10. And the networks and main roadways have flooded, especially Richardson Avenue, which has been a problem for years. It actually is in our regional transportation report, so the culverts at Walker Street. And Jen and I have worked on that. It's actually in a national priority database now to be funded. A company called NatureServe put it in there, and it's part of a NOAA funding opportunity. And again, what came up tonight with Paul, I was thinking about it a lot when he was talking about Routes 140 and Route 123. There are problems there, and maybe when you redesign this village district, you can look at that. There may be grant opportunities, and I'll cover that at the end. Look at high wind, obviously, the high wind event that you guys experienced. A lot of people say it was an anomaly, but it was a disaster nonetheless. And it's something you got to recover from. And I think one of the really perceptive things that folks said about that was when the tree cover goes and we have to clear areas and you're down to the understory, which wasn't much there, and you're down to bare soil in other spots, They said right away, hey, that's right across from one of the recharge areas for the aquifer and the town wells. So what should we do? And they thought immediately, let's replant, because the trees help hold the water in there, the topsoil disappeared, the understory won't come back the way it should, and this is how nature functions to recharge that aquifer that's around that well. So there were really a lot of deep thinking at these workshops, which is really great. Drought, fire, and extreme temperatures. We really got into that, especially with the flood-drought cycle. You flood, the forests get flooded, the wetlands off the side get flooded, the big trees beside the road get flooded. Then you don't have any rain for a while. What happens? The root systems in these big trees, especially the large trees, like a lot of the pines with shallow roots, the root systems become corrupted. You get the big wind, everything goes over. It knocks out power, creates the bare land, it affects the aquifer, habitat, the whole bit. So again, people were really doing some deep thinking. And the extreme temperatures, too. The thing you think about there is, what types of vulnerable populations do we have in Norton? Are there special needs populations, are there elderly populations? And when we have extreme temperatures, everybody thinks heat, and the number of 90-degree days has gone up again in the last century. And we talked about that in the groups. But also the extreme cold. Do we have sufficient heating shelters? Or warming shelters? Do we have sufficient cooling shelters, even outside? Do we have enough tree canopy? Do we have enough air conditioning capacity? Do we have backup generators where we need them? Are our municipal staff who have to go and meet the needs of these things? And it's not just, at town locations, even places like Wheaton College. We had, we were talking about that. The town serves that too, your first responders. And your first responders were also at this meeting. They were very well represented. And they had some excellent suggestions. And one of the great things was, and it's come up in several towns, again, we don't always get a chance to sit down and work with the people who are coming up with these plans and making decisions. They could talk to the highway guys, and the highway guys saying, yeah, we know culverts here, 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 here. This is where the road fails. This is where the culverts have failed. This is where we'd love to put in new bridges. And they might say, yeah, but have you ever tried to get around to this part of town in a flood? Have you ever tried to get over here? When the roads are closed, we can't get engines here. We can't get emergency response vehicles there. And then it got people to thinking, well, if we have to add 10, 15 minutes to response time, that could be a life. So again, lots of good cross-communication, lots of deep thinking. And again, the changing seasonality, number 4, we really talked about how the changing seasonality and changing temperatures really affect what goes on in a town. And then what we did was we broke it down further into how these 4 things affect our infrastructure, our environmental resources, and society as a whole. So infrastructure, a lot of the things you're going to be familiar with. Again, Route 123, 140, the drainage there, what's going on, flooding. Particularly, again, Walker Street, North Worcester Street, Plain Street, East Hodges Street, the culverts. They said, let's look at the dams in town. Barrowsville, Chartley's being repaired, and the Norton Reservoir dams. But again, even when the dams are fixed, there's a responsibility then to make sure they're inspected and maintained. So these are all things, fixes don't happen, you let them go, because that's when your infrastructure really begins to fail. And if you're thinking, especially, again, going back to your plans, revitalizing the center, the district, and you're also getting into a master plan now, it's a great time to incorporate the recommendations from municipal vulnerability into that. Some of your environmental concerns on the next page. Actually, one of the other things, too, which was really important, your water department was there, sewer. Water and sewer pump stations that are susceptible to flooding. A lot of people don't realize, a lot of the electrical works are low to the ground. So if you have flooding, especially elevated flooding, or if they're exposed to high flood levels, you may have to raise the level of the works inside to make sure that they don't get impacted, because if they do, water and sewer goes down in certain parts of town. And that came to mind too when you were talking about the sewer ring going in parts of town now where it wasn't before. So it creates a potential, it's another strength, but it's a potential vulnerability. And the other thing too, we talked about the senior center and that the town's needs for sheltering could be alleviated a little bit more if some changes are made at the senior center. There's some flooding that goes on there in the parking lot. That could be alleviated. The need for backup generators, maybe increase the cooling and heating capacity and sheltering capacity there. As far as environmental concerns go, obviously wetland and floodplain. If you can retain the wetlands and the floodplain, they provide free natural services to you. It's just what it is, flood storage, habitat, the whole bit. Water storage, infiltration, aquifer recharge, same deal. Forest management was huge, and that's why we brought it up, and we talked about it in a couple of different contexts. It's going to come up again in the societal section. But we were talking about how important it really is to maintain our forests, and we did a rundown in each group of what types of services does a forest provide. Obviously, cooling, air quality, habitat, contiguous habitat of paths and trails for wildlife to go through, water supply protection, infiltration. But then again, there's the vulnerability. With more disease, vector-borne disease coming, people always think it's just ticks and mosquitoes, that people are experiencing more disease. But there's also tree-borne pests that we haven't seen before now. People saying, look out for the Asian longhorn beetle, look out for this. And the heating and flood and drought cycles affect the health of trees too. So if you get a diseased tree that's going through the flood and drought cycles, it makes it even more vulnerable to collapse. And we were talking about prioritizing resiliency to climate change while balancing new development. And I was thinking of that again with the center. When you go and look at what you can put in the center and how you can develop it, you can make it a green center. You can make it a resilient center. And there are funds. When you're talking about pursuing grant monies to do things, there are funds to help you do that and plan for it. Societal. One of the things that came up, and I've lived here long enough that I know, it's like I said, 33 years, it's like every town that I service, there are 27 cities and towns. You're all like my hometown, so I say, okay, the CPA debate. But that did come up again about, an additional source of funding, but especially if you're going after grants, it's a great source of match funding. And a lot of the communities I work with have adopted it and used it very, very effectively that way. One of the other things is transportation in emergencies. Do we have adequate transportation in emergencies? Do we have adequate transportation routes in emergencies? And again, your first responders were great. How do we get around? How can we make it easier to get around? How can we be more responsive? And that's where the communications also came up. These things logically followed. They said, do we have a good communication system? Do we have a redundant communication system? If something goes down, do we have a central area where we can say everything's there, all the information we need? They can get a hold of us, we can get a hold of them. Should we really look at it and assess it and try to improve it if we can? Again, this was group thinking, and that came up again when we talked about town hall, and town hall being a center, the fire station being center, the whole bit. How well do we integrate the information we have with the planning that we have, so if we have to respond quickly, be flexible, be nimble, can we? And it's a great thing. These are people saying we have to do a self-assessment. We talked about multi-hazard mitigation planning. I know your fire chief's been trying to do this for years. One of the great things about having an MVP certified plan, which your plan is complete now, we're sending it to the state, it probably should be certified by early fall. You're about 85% of the way towards doing a hazard mitigation plan, which means any monies that you already have stuck aside should be more than sufficient to complete that plan. But the beauty is, then you'd have two sources of funding. If the hazard mitigation plan with MEMA and FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Act Agency, gets you federal money in certain disasters. But by having a certified MVP plan, I'll go over this with the action grant, you have access to more money to implement the actions that you've put down in this plan, and the money is state money. The other thing was Council on Aging, as far as social things. Again, fix the flood problem, increase the capacities out there, and then Wheaton College. The fact that you do have to respond to Wheaton College, maybe figure out how you can work with Wheaton College to, help limit the town's response. And not only that, but maybe costs, because it does cost you when you have to go out there to respond. But it's not always, the whole report, the next thing was, it's not about just weaknesses and vulnerabilities, it's about strengths. And one of the great things being in the room with your folks was, like I said, the degree of camaraderie that was there. You could see that these guys and women like to work together. They know how to get around a problem. They can be creative. They can be nimble and flexible, and they're very much aware of the problems that exist out there, and they very much want to solve them, which made the group facilitation a very easy thing to do. There was no dead silence at any one point during these workshops. And like I said, they were both 4 hours, and nobody was clock watching. And in both sessions, people stayed around afterwards to break down to small groups and network. But one of the things that was brought up, and I was glad Paul mentioned the zoning before too, because one of the biggest impacts was the low impact development zoning reform that you guys did a couple of years ago. because that will allow for these nature-based solutions and nature-based strategies to be put on properties, as well as allowing for conservation of land that's going to be really important around these properties to help make them more resilient. You're one of 4 municipalities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that's home to 3 areas of critical environmental concern. So you're very special. So you've taken care of a lot of the natural assets that are very special to the community that help promote resilience. They talked about the Great Woods Conservation Area being a strength. Your record of preservation, but also partnership with the people around you, like the Land Preservation Society of Norton, the Great Woods Lands Conservancy. You guys do a great job. Social services and community strengths, they talk about St. Mary's, St. Vincent de Paul, and their resources and their staff. Both were cited as being very dedicated and provide partnerships and partnership opportunities outside of the community. The YMCA is a partner in public education and community space. And again, the senior center and staff, very committed staff, and they could use more resources. Then I think I'm going to walk you over to the multi-hazard mitigation plan. The page that starts with multi-hazard mitigation planning. At the end of it, your crew came up with over 50 recommendations for projects and areas of concern for the town to look at. And then we do something really horrible to them. We say, what are your top 3 concerns? Because the state wants to know what your top 3 concerns are. And we said, here's the other thing about this plan that's beautiful. Like I said, it's organic, it's flexible. Everything that was recorded at that meeting went into your plan, which means every project, whether it's in the top 3 or not, is eligible to be considered by the state for funding. And obviously, the low-hanging fruit's going to occur at different times. You could go for project number 47 if that was the one that came up at that time. But your top 3, and again, the chief's been pushing for this for a long time, and I think it's well due. The multi-hazard mitigation planning. The second was communications, and make sure that you have adequate communication, because in an emergency, you're dead without it, really. Third one was stormwater management, and again, looking at LID, and really kind of revisiting those culverts and stormwater sites that have given you chronic problems over the years. And the last one, I gave you 4 in this one because everybody was so enthusiastic about it and really couldn't make up their mind. They said bylaw review, which again was something that was brought up tonight. Let's take a deep dive in our bylaws. And in this case, see where we have the ability to put in some of these resiliency requirements, to do nature-based solutions, green infrastructure solutions, work with nature when we design our subdivisions, our developments, when we look at what we want to set aside, where we want to purchase land. So bylaw review is really important. It's kind of what makes it go on the local level, the planning level. The other thing I included in here, because we just finished it, and it was a great project, we got together, it says Norton Mansfield Eastern Regional Vulnerabilities and Concerns. Well, after we got together with your initial local group, we put together a map with all these projects on it, and we do it with dots, a great dot system. So it's very easy to read. All the GIS maps are available to Norton. We got together with the 3 local project coordinators from Easton, Mansfield, and Norton right here. Norton hosted it. And we went through and looked at everybody's projects, all 3 reports, so probably about 150 projects on the list. And they came up with a list of 20 projects, but some of them are multiple. Areas where Norton and Mansfield have had chronic problems over the years, and where they could go in on regional projects, where Norton and Mansfield, Norton and Easton, and then Easton with Norton and Mansfield. So the projects are all great. They're all kind of related to the same types of activities that we cited for Norton, because Mansfield had a lot of the same types of concerns, and so did Easton. So what's the trick with this? Like I said, it was a regional effort, and under the new guidelines with the MVP program, you are now eligible. On the next page says action grants. What's so great about the action grants? You can start applying for them right away, as soon as you're certified. There are $2 million available. It's a $2 million cap on single entity projects, like a city or town. There's a $5 million cap on regional projects. So if all of a sudden on the west side you wanted to work with Mansfield, do Otis Street, Balcom Street, or along 140 South Main Street, where you've had culverts flooding the whole bit, you could go in on a regional project. And the types of projects that they like you to do, again, nature-based solutions, so you can come up with infrastructure that works well with nature to either improve flows, improve stormwater management, look at forestry management. One of the towns came in, they wanted to do, and actually this came up with you guys too, a regional forestry management assessment and plan, so that you can be efficient with your recharge to the aquifer, your shared aquifer, but also they said go out and work with the utility, so that the utility, while we're doing our forestry planning and assessment, they can go along the utility lines and look at the vulnerability of their own systems. What shapes are the poles in? Are our transformers located in vulnerable places? Do we have the right gauge wire in the right places based on what might happen? And I thought that was a great, activity when you go out there with the utilities, because the utilities have foresters. They can work with you and they can share in the responsibility and the load. So like I said, right off the bat, you can do detailed vulnerability and risk assessment, public education and communications, local bylaws, ordinances, and plans. You can do that deep dive and see how ready you are, how resilient you are as a community with what you have. Redesigns and retrofits. Some people already come in, communities have been certified, doing culvert replacement, doing dam assessments, dam assessment reports, things like that. Nature-based storm drainage protection solution. That was all over your MVP plan. But things like that, technology and technology solutions too. Assessments to do that. You could do a community assessment for that. So that's the beauty of it. We have the maps, the matrix, and everything that you guys can put up on your website as well. It's already, Jen's reviewed the final draft of the report. I'm sending it into the state. I've sent Jen the materials to send it into the state, and they'll review it. And like I said, you should probably be certified by the fall. And in the meantime, you have a whole list of projects to get ready for. And I would say you guys, and again, Lakeville, Rochester, and Freetown, and I think there's only 2 or 3 other areas in the state. The regional money's waiting for you guys. And this is the first of 3 regional listening sessions we're having. You guys are hosting the first. Jen said she would like to host the first. We're going to be doing this again in Mansfield on July 17th and in Easton on July 16th. So everybody will be privy to the same information, and hopefully you'll all be ready to bust out of the gate in the fall.
Great.
And again, it was a great town to work with. All 3 towns were great, but Norton, I'd like to thank the Norton Media Center too. We were there too. And they provided a great space. It really was. And thank you. For those of you who sat in and participated, I really thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Wonderful. Yeah, it's really.
Well, I don't go away, so you guys know where to find me anyways.
Yeah.
All right.
No, it was very informative being there, and it was amazing how broken up into 2 separate groups, how both groups, it was like we had mental telepathy. We would come up with the same lists, almost like we were cheating off of each other's papers. But there have been several things that I had heard in these seminars that, I know one, they were talking about a dam removal over in Taunton in the Whittington area. And I had mentioned to Jen how that might be an idea on the Cross Street Dam. And how, where the town is going to be kind of inheriting that, it might be a good place to make lower the water there so that we have a place for floodwater surging, and she concurred that it'd be a perfect spot for something like that.
Yeah, and actually, one of the other things too, with the certified MVP plan, and the fact that you guys have a priority development area plan through the South Coast Rail Corridor, both of those items get you extra points in any of the state's grants programs. So you guys would be moved up a couple of notches for having those 2 certified plans. And the dam removal aspect, or at least the dam assessment, that's in there. Even the regional group got together and said do dam assessments. And the Division of Ecological Restoration has a beautiful program that we did work with them on the Mill River, doing a series of 3 dam removals and 1 dam improvement. It ended up bringing the herring fishery back first time in 210 years. And they saw about 7 or 8 different species that they didn't even think would come up that far into the Taunton anymore. But as far as this goes, it would probably improve your stormwater, stream flows, the whole bit, probably bring back species and habitat, increase connectivity. and DER has a priority projects list that you could be nominated for, and then they'll come out and help you do the assessment, and then you could prepare a grant and move on to the next phase. So there's a lot of, great benefits to doing this.
Yeah. It was 2 days well spent, I think, on my part. I learned an awful lot. And it was very impressive, the team, Bill, and representatives from several environmental groups were there to help us figure out what we were actually doing.
It was fun. Well, it's all, like I said, it's all you guys. It's local knowledge. So you guys put together a really good plan. We just helped them do it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Next up on our agenda is Mr. Dave Lennon, who's here to talk about the water bodies.
Just the committee wants to come and give you an update on the project, the invasive plant treatment of all 4 ponds in town. We've had great success with the project up to this date. Lake Winnicott has had significant improvement, so has the reservoir. Last year, Chartley Pond didn't receive treatment due to the dam drawdown and the project over there, so we'll get back into treating that and back over at Barrowsville where the water chestnuts are the main problem over there. So we were waiting on ESS and Solitude. Oh, Mike, did you get any fresh info this week about the treatment yet? I know as of earlier in the week, they hadn't put together, Solitude hadn't put together the plan yet.
No.
They were just going over the mapping, the spring mapping.
Right.
And surveys to come up with the plan. So we were hoping to have that info tonight. Still waiting on that, but.
And that, Dave, that's just showing one of their concerns with the reservoir. Let me just get rid of this. Is there, one of the targets they're going to have to look at is the variable leaf milfoil. These areas up here on the north side, they've seen some.
Yeah, it's still pretty thick in there. I was out there today, and.
But other than that, if I can, Dave, go through the other slides. Yeah. Everything else looks pretty good. Just go through. Of course, it's not. This is. Excuse me. This is the fan wart cover on the reservoir, and you can see that very minimal.
Huge improvement.
Yep. And this is the curly leaf pondweed cover. Dave would probably know better than me what that is, but there's not much concern.
Nope.
A little bit.
Looks like Mansfield is seeding it or something.
Yeah, well, you have the river coming in with the high phosphorus and stuff like that, so.
And on the water chestnut cover on the reservoir it's virtually clear.
Yeah, there's a little spot in the cove there behind, off of Robinson Lane.
Right.
Happened to pull a few out of there this week myself, but there's, nothing that can't be managed.
I think that you can see the cove up there and
Yep.
it's full.
And it's really limited to a couple, little patches, but it's something we certainly got to keep an eye on.
And this is bladderwort cover.
Yep.
A little bit across on the other side of Mansfield Ave.
But pretty much non-existent, so. One of the good things about the project is we're actually starting to see some native plants starting to grow back to take place of these invasives. These native ones typically won't grow as thick and out of control as some of these invasives that are pretty tough to manage. And we were really dealing with 3 of the 4 ponds were really worst case scenario. They were so infested that Lake Winnicott was almost unusable. Barrowsville Pond was a sea of green. So, the project has been moving along. It was we received funding back in town meeting for a 3-year project. We should have any idea if there's, I know there was discussion of maybe some leftover funding depending on the treatment options this year. Moving forward, we're certainly going to have to look at, prevention. So one of the things that we had talked about with the project originally was plastering this all over the place at our points of entry and exit. I know Mike, we've talked to Mike about seeing if we can get this. We've worked with the scouts on putting some kiosks up as informational kiosks, and we do have this up on that small kiosk over at Juniper Beach. I can tell you I've replaced it a dozen times since we've started the treatment, twice already this spring. This is my last laminated sign. It'll go up when the one I just put up gets taken down. It always gets pulled down. So, part of this project, I think, is some fixed signage. Most of the communities that have done projects like this have erected some fixed signs like this at points of access, and these are really key to stop reinfestation, because a small particle of some of these plants brought in by boats, canoes, kayaks, jet skis, can really reinfest the lake, and we just got rid of that. A big problem in town, and making the public aware that we're doing this is key. This sign is key. Some other communities have, some of the extremes, you go out west to California, they have dogs that can sniff out all this stuff, and they're a mile from the boat ramps. We don't have to go that far, but signage is going to help. We'll continue the public awareness campaign to let people know, what we're doing. The result of less infestation is more usage, and we're seeing that. I can tell you, most people who live on the lake, on the reservoir, Lake Winnicott, you're seeing people using the lake. You're seeing people water ski for the first time in years, which is, more usage. So getting that word out at those access points to stop that. Another thing that some communities have done have required to put your boat, canoe, kayak, whatever it is on the water, a conservation, or it's been called a bunch of different things, a stamp that you affix to your boat. And that would guarantee that the people who are using the waters are given this information. Whether it's going to the town website, to the conservation website, and signing up and getting a sticker that, not something that you pay for, but more informational, so that we know that the people who are using the ponds know about this and know that we've spent a lot of money, a lot of resources in the town to alleviate the problem, and now prevention is the key. So moving forward, I don't know if Mike has any updates on if we've come across. I know we've dropped some copies off. This is key. We got to have this as part of this project. I know, it's not going to require an article at a town meeting and a vote of any serious funding. We're only talking, hundreds of dollars in signage. We've spent hundreds of thousands on this project. We got to get this. We got to get these signs up. If we don't, we're going to go backwards. We've just made huge leaps and bounds to clear these waters up, and we got to come up with a plan. I know we have, Bill had mentioned updating bylaws. We did update our town water bodies bylaws a few years ago. Comprehensive signage at our points of access. I know the Juniper Beach access on the reservoir has been a hot button topic over the past 20 years, not just year. There's been problems going back decades there, and I don't think anyone's really addressed those problems. I've been around for quite a while in town, and to see more usage, because we've opened the lakes up, we've got clean water, we've got great recreational opportunities out there. we need to preserve what we've accomplished to this point. So I don't know, does conservation govern Juniper Beach? So maybe you guys can work with the Conservation Commission and getting some signs. I did send an email to Jennifer. She said she put some in for the budget coming up.
I know Jen made some signs, and the sign that you had dropped off here, Keith has that because he can make the metal signs.
Awesome.
Down
Great.
back.
So, coming up with a plan, I think the project can't be complete without this, so I can't stress that enough. And even that sticker project, conservation stamp, whatever you want to call it, it's not a charge to anyone, but to get it and to put your boat on any of the bodies of water, being informed about the project we did and how to stop the spread is really important. I don't know how we proceed with that. I know it could be done, through the town website or something like that. Stickers could be made available with a pamphlet at Town Hall or something like that. I'm sure we could, the committee can help come up with a solution to that.
I was just going to question the fact that to put any teeth into it, I would assume it'd have to be some kind of a bylaw that would require.
Yeah, I would think that probably would require.
So if that's something we could work towards, maybe getting a bylaw that any boat or.
Any vessel that's coming on our waters.
Has to display the
sticker, and for the reason not we're trying to generate revenue but it's awareness, and I know other communities have done that and it's worked really well. That way everybody who's using the lake knows what's going on, because I can tell you it ain't the case. There's.
Right.
And with the updated bylaws and signage, and I can just give you an example of the good, the bad, and the ugly I see out there. I'm out there every day, sometimes 12 hours a day with work. The other night, I was out. A couple came off the beach in a canoe with 2 kids, right? 5 minutes later, in comes a jet ski, backs it into the water, doesn't move the truck trailer, just leaves it in the water. All the guys get out. First guy hops on. They make a beeline straight out, and they do a loop around the people in the canoe, right? Mind you, it's after 5 o'clock. Town bylaws prohibit jet skis on any of our lakes or ponds. Why? Because the residents voted it in. Those people, that poor gentleman and his kids, they threw their arms up and they left, because that group back and forth. Not one of those guys put on the life jacket, which has the tether to kill switch.
Yep.
Extremely dangerous. First of all, those jet skis shouldn't have been out there. If there was a nice sign with our bylaws, that person in the canoe could have enjoyed our reservoir. Instead, they packed up the kids, they went back, and they left. And they had to go by the group of guys sitting there, and that's the bad, that's the ugly. That shouldn't happen to anybody out there. And if we had some basic rules and regulations posted, that family stays out there and they enjoy it. Okay, so that's an example of why we need comprehensive and we've passed the, maybe.
Right.
And we've done that multiple years ago. And I know the committee has stressed this in the past. We've recommended it. Folks, we can't let something happen and then be reactive. We can't let an accident happen and then post the signage. Okay, we got to be proactive with this. We have a nice, beautiful reservoir, great recreational opportunities that I can tell you. I travel and I go to a lot of different ponds and lakes. There's a great guide called the Public Access Guide to the Waters of Massachusetts. Norton Reservoir has a couple spots on it that list portages and stuff. I go to a lot of these places and there's one common thing: signage with rules and regulations for usage. We're one of the only areas around with a lake that's one of the biggest in southeastern Massachusetts without rules and regulations. It's an accident waiting to happen. I see it all the time. we got to be proactive, folks. We got to get signs down there. We got to manage that area a little bit better. It's up to us, because nobody else is going to do it except us. And the Water Bodies Committee has been dedicated to it. I personally have dedicated a lot of time and effort to keeping the reservoir clean with the cleanup that we do. The committee has done a lot on the ponds, trying to improve them. When the water was drawn down on Chartley, we did organized a cleanup crew. The scouts have been very supportive and active in helping us, putting up kiosks, informational kiosks, like Winnicott and the reservoir in a few different spots. So constant, there are projects going on out there in the community. This one, we got to finish it, and we got to prepare, in the next few years to have some funding to monitor and to do some treatment. Certainly not the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we have spent, but, smaller amounts, 10,000s. I think ESS, our consultants, after this season will come up with a plan moving forward as to how the town can progress in preventing a reinfestation of the pond. So, and, moving forward, what we have to do to maintain and keep them viable for recreation and for the residents of the town. So the project was met with great support at town meeting when we went for funding, so I would think that any future funding to continue the project and monitor and do any spot treatments, I think the community would support. So we're going to have to also look at that, and we're going to touch base with Serpent too and see if there's any grant funding available, because now that our permits are up and active, there's obviously certain ways we can work with Serpent. I don't know. We'll try to reach out to Bill and Sandy is our rep, Olahead?
Yeah.
See if there's any potential of.
And just one thing that came up through that other process was talking about the CPA again. And I know we had put out there, we're looking for volunteers to be on a committee just to look at the possibility of the pros and cons of a CPA, and no one has come forward, so.
CPA?
Community Preservation Act.
Oh.
So possibly, if we had the Community Preservation Act, I would think we could use some of those funds on future pond cleanup.
Oh,
so,
very good.
if anyone's out there that's interested in being on that review committee, we'd appreciate them coming
Great.
forward.
All right. Awesome. Well, I know the summer's just kicking off, and I enjoyed 4 or 5 hours out there with a whole bunch of kids this morning. It was a beautiful day, and good to see people using the lake and all the ponds again. So any questions, if we can answer, if we have.
Mr. Chairman, Dave, thank you so much. That was really informative. And it actually is getting me a little bit nervous, because when we initially okayed the funding for the initial cleanup, we recognized at the time that it was a huge commitment on the town's part, meaning hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I thought that we had put something in place so that there would be preventative maintenance moving forward, right? So if what I'm hearing tonight is that when the funding dries up, we don't have anything in our budget for preventive?
We'll
Or
need to appropriate future money for future years.
So, and the thing is, I thought that was kind of part of the vote, because it can't be a, do you guys want to? Type question. Like,
Right. Well, it's
it has to, the
a
money has to be
continuance,
made
yes.
available, right? So is there, do we have something in place right now?
I think what it was is that we had, when we made the vote to spend the money for the cleanup, we had indicated to the town manager that we wanted it to be a line item in the.
Correct, right, as we were moving
If
forward.
there's any money there until he puts in that line item.
Okay. So it has to be an absolute line item. It can't
Right.
be.
It can be a line item, or an easier thing would be if you say it's going to cost us, we anticipate for the next 3 years to monitor the lakes, it's going to cost us this. You can do it as a separate article. Because if you do it as a line item, you have to appropriate a certain amount, and then at the end of the year, it's either spent or it's not spent. If it's not spent, it goes back into the general fund. You can't carry over a line item year after year after year.
That makes sense, and I just don't want.
But articles can be carried.
They can, okay. I just don't want us depending on grants to
Right.
do this, right?
Yeah.
There's
Right.
people out there.
Well, this, we'll try to look at any funding source that, keeps the project going, obviously, but,
And furthermore, I think that the signs is like something they would absolutely have to do right now, right? Get like real signs, metal signs
Right.
staked in to all the water bodies, regardless of where the cost comes from. We just have to make that happen. I don't know if it has to go through, conservation has to put it in her budget, or if we still have money left in the
yeah, I don't
initial
know.
article.
You guys are the money people, we're just a lowly committee.
But I
so.
think it's sooner than better. And then just to, your committee has done such a good job, and I guess the great part about the lake's looking so beautiful, and the reservoir looking so beautiful is now everybody wants to use it.
Yeah.
So one thing that we didn't put a lot of effort into way back then, because we were looking at weed infestation, was how we were going to police it moving
Yeah.
forward. So, I like the idea of the stickers, but then who's going to police it? Who's going to?
Get the jet ski.
Well, I can tell you, I had a nice long discussion with an environmental police officer over the weekend after I witnessed that jet ski incident, and one of the things the environmental police don't do is enforce town bylaws. So the recommendation of, is to call dispatch, talk to,
So
and
that's-
I know that I've talked to Chief Clark in the past about this, and, obviously, they're run thin, they don't have, the resources to manage the lake. So, I don't know how many calls they get, I'm sure it's a lot to go down to that area to resolve disputes between boats and homeowners and residents and boaters and stuff like that. I don't know what the solution to that is.
I think I might have one. if I-
Yeah, grant
So,
funding for a boat or something? No.
So the thing is, I totally get what you're saying with the police department, and how are they gonna, go after a guy on a jet ski from land, right? So why can't we, and maybe I'm naive, but why can't we put a program into place where you actually have to pay to have a sticker on your boat to use our reservoir? Because why should it be free to everybody? Just, you pay, if you go to the beach, you pay,
Yeah, I didn't know because it was a public reservoir, if there were restrictions
Yeah.
because we received it with,
The way
There's
we-
got to be some way that we can get some revenue out of this. And then, like, the guys that ride the bikes around, why can't we try to come up with some sort of funding that we have a police jet ski?
Yeah.
And once in a while, he's on the reservoir, and once in a while, he's on Winnicott.
Yeah.
And then start giving out tickets.
Yeah.
If you
well,
can't
the
pay-
environmental police, they respond to calls and stuff, and typically, they're not coming to the Norton Reservoir on patrol. State boat ramps are usually, so it's very rare to see the patrol boat on the lake. They do a couple times a year show up, which is great to see. I know the residents are happy to see some type of enforcement, so. But it is frustrating that we have one of the biggest bodies of water in southeastern Mass and zero enforcement, really. It's a problem, and it's a risk for the town,
Is it-
especially when we don't have the rules posted.
Is this something that your committee can kind of do a little bit of work for us on, and?
Yeah, let us
come up
know.
with
We can-
some, ideas and how we might come up with the funding to actually pay for an additional officer
Yeah,
on a jet ski?
Yeah,
And,
I'm
it would be part-time, it's a seasonal job.
yeah,
It
I'm
doesn't
sure,
have to
Chief Clark, I don't know, we can try to touch base and see what kind of grant funding is available for public safety and water safety and stuff like that, but it makes sense that we progress and try to find a way to police it,
Excuse me.
Yes.
I'm a resident right there at Juniper and Lazy Lane, and I witness that all the time with these jet skis. And the signage, that. just-
Doesn't exist.
The signage that's there now was just recently changed last year because I had a meeting here. And it was changed a little bit this past weekend, 4:30 in the morning. On Saturday, I had voters out there, and again at 5 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. I generally call and ask them to come down from the police station, I usually get from the dispatcher, okay, what's the problem? Well, I have to explain that there's a sign there that says they're trespassing. I don't feel like I should have to explain that there's signs there that it's constant. Last year I was calling all the time. It's redundant. I mean, it's over and over. Weekdays are better than weekends. This past weekend, we had probably 25 vehicles down there parked everywhere in this small residential neighborhood. I've been in front of the board. I am still not getting any answers. I have letters that I've written in 2004, 2005, 2006. I have a letter from what was written up in an article when Norton Manor once existed, where Mr. Kimball had stated, and it's written in there, I have it here if you'd like to see it, that we need to act on this. 2006. We're now at 2019. Nothing's been happening down there. And it's overcrowding. We're a residential neighborhood with little kids. I watched somebody come flying around the corner on Lazy Lane into the little dirt area and almost hit kids the other day. They're out there playing. But it's just not an area for it. They need this boat ramp somewhere else. I don't understand how a deeded beach can turn into a boat launch to begin with. I don't know what the legality of that is, but there's got to be something that says we still have deeded beach rights and we're not even able to use them because of the boating. And the jet skis, they're out there sometimes until 8 o'clock at night. I hear them winding out like they're full throttle.
And we passed that bylaw to stop that from happening too, so.
I videoed it. I've had kids who came walking in, driving in, they look like a carnival car coming out 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning with their boom boxes. It's constant. Nobody has any respect down there for the residents who live there. You know, I've owned my home down there for 27 years. It's been an ongoing, long process, and nothing's getting done. Something needs to get done.
And with, I believe Conservation has jurisdiction down there, right? I mean, they got to take the lead because I feel for her.
The signs say 6 a.m. They're there at 4:35 in the morning.
And you know, a lot of these, sorry to interrupt, a lot of these, and I fish, I enjoy the lake fish. We get fishing clubs that come and have tournaments with no permits. And I know that's in the bylaw as well. That should be on the sign. And I've talked to some of these, well, it's not that type of tournament. It's a tournament. And nobody should be using our reservoir for any type of financial gain without permission from the Conservation Commission, whether it's a fishing tournament for a case of beer or a fishing tournament for $1,000 or bragging rights. Because it leads to people using the reservoir, you know, because they want to be the first guy to get there to get one of those very few parking spots for a truck and trailer. And over the years, that area has gotten more and more overgrown, squeezes the parking area, the car, you know, it's a problem, it's been a problem. I challenge this board to solve it, because it needs to be solved, and the committee we're willing to help any way we can. Correspond with us, we'll do whatever we can to, I know, alleviate so that everybody can enjoy it. So, and now that it's cleaned up, we're happy, and we gotta overcome what some of the, you know, higher usage and some of the issues that come with that. So we look forward to working with you guys again. So we'll touch base once we get survey results and treatment plan, and we'll come to you after that. And again, reach out. We'll obviously try to talk to the police chief and see if we can work with him and see if there's any funding that can help that process along, and if even they're open to it. You know, I mean, they're stretched thin as it is, so, you know, it's going to take some good funding to get a position like that and to get it active and working. So thank you, folks.
Units?
Putting maybe plexiglass over that little thing that
Did you say Keith was gonna make metal signs?
Yeah.
Keith is, yeah.
And it seems to stay, but I do see people taking them down all the time.
Just for clarification, Keith Silver is in the process of making some metal signs.
Right.
So
Now, do we know what's on those signs, bylaws, et cetera?
I'm not going to tell you I know.
All right.
I just know that he's making signs. If they're not appropriate, then we'll have to be
Yeah, well, we
told.
gotta incorporate the correct information on those signs, so.
Just,
Yes, Mr. Yunus.
just one thing to talk about. In the MVP plan was the possibility of seeking grant money to take out the Barrowsville Dam. And, you know, in this draft possibility of expenses on the pond cleanup, there's $190,750 for cleanup on Barrowsville Pond. So the question is, do we want to spend money
On a pond
on a
that
pond that
could
may be
be,
drained at some point? And
because
there's not
there-
much benefit to,
right, because there are, like Bill said, Department of Ecological Restoration has lots of money, and they're doing lots of projects all over the state, removing some of these smaller dam impoundments.
Right.
Increasing river flow and stuff like that, so they've had great success in what they're doing, so.
just to give you an idea, like, based on what they're showing here for possibilities, and it all depends on the surveys they do each year, to get us through June of 2021 would be $408,000 total for the whole program. If you take out Barrowsville Pond, it's $217,000. It's
So there's a
a
considerable
significant
savings there, so.
savings, and right now we have a balance of $298,000 in the account. So with the Barrowsville Pond in there, we don't have enough to get through 2021. So,
Well, that may be an option, obviously. I don't know who would take the lead on deciding that, but, you know, I know that that's been discussed as an option, and, you know, that would have to be, I don't know who would discuss that and who would make that determination, but obviously, something pretty quick, you know, as to whether we're gonna,
well, I would think that, just my opinion, when the Board of Selectmen decided to support this program, they said they wanted all the ponds in town. I would think if the Water Bodies Committee was in support of not doing Barrowsville Pond and came back to the board with that suggestion, then the board could vote to.
well, we could certainly take that up at our next meeting, so.
Okay.
I'll make note of that. All right, great, thanks, folks.
Thank you. Yes, Peter?
Yes, I'm Peter Wiggins, and I live near the reservoir on Medford Avenue. It's a beautiful reservoir, and I take a lot of photos with it and post it on Facebook, and it's a beautiful reservoir. Let's keep it that way. All right, Peter.
Anything else? Okay.
So, actually, Mr.
yes.
Chairman, about the boat ramp, is that, can we dovetail into that on this? Because I know that's sort of like a lingering issue. I don't know if that's a separate discussion.
We have not heard back from Fish and Game yet on their study, so I'll have Jen reach out to them again and see where they're at.
Okay, because there is plans to put a new boat ramp in, right? Is that correct?
They want to put a boat ramp on the reservoir. It's just trying to find the right spot that's deep enough and has adequate parking.
Okay.
We could always take Keith Silver's land right next to the reservoir, but I'm only joking, because if we ever did, now I'm going to get in trouble with townspeople, thinking I'm doing it just to give the money to Keith.
Okay. So for Juniper Beach, when I was down there, there are large rocks that block access to Juniper Beach, and people have to go around to, I believe it's Lazy Lane. I've heard various stories as to where those rocks came from, but I believe that's a public road, so can't we get those rocks out of there and try to keep the traffic off of Lazy Lane? Because that's a very tight turn that goes through there. And I think that's, if I heard correctly, that's where the kids were playing, right, as the vehicles are going around? Is that possible?
I would suggest the best solution there would be to send a letter to everyone on that road with that suggestion, and then see what they, because at the last meeting we had, there were people that lived on that road that didn't want the boulders taken out, so.
So can we do that? Can we ask, or put something on the agenda to engage the community on that? Because I think it just seems like crazy that one person supposedly put rocks across a public road years ago, and they've stayed there ever since.
Historically, that's not unique to that road.
Okay. We'll have to talk afterwards about where else the rocks went.
Mr. Units.
I know it's before my town manager report, we're not there yet, but I know Chris has been waiting patiently, so if I could just do, as part of my town manager's report, I was just going to have Chris talk that he did get the reserve fund transfer from the Finance Committee for the asbestos removal on Building K, is it, Chris?
That's correct. So Monday night, I went to the Finance Committee, and after I got a positive vote from this board, Finance Committee followed suit and appropriated the $49,000 and 760-something to fund ESM's interior abatement of Building K. So now, they were scheduled to start next week. I got a further update today that they're going to now schedule and coordinate that with the EPA, so that might be a couple weeks before they start. I think the only other update that I can give you at this point is something we touched upon at the last meeting, that we're going to be setting up a major meeting within the next 10 days to sit down with, as we're at a crossroads, we feel that we need to have a master plan or a plan to move forward with that site. So we've asked Mass Development, we've asked the AG's office, we've asked Serpide to come down, CEC, and again, the big players out there, EPA, DEP, to come and sit down with us and then formulate a plan to move forward, a use for the site, where to find funding, so that we can move forward with the remediation and to remove the blight from the community. So that's where we stand now. I've started involving Paul, the town planner. He's involved Serpide. And so we're all about to sit down at the table. So I'll have hopefully a lot more information for you next time I come and give you an update.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay?
Thank you, Chris.
Any questions?
The 49K, is that for the asbestos as well as the demo, or just the asbestos?
Just the asbestos, and then EPA is spending the money on the demo of Building K so that they can do the oil remediation within the, underneath the building. That ran from the bank to the former underground oil stanks.
And Building K is the one on Cross Street that you...
No, it's the one on Elm Street that ran along parallel with the riverbank.
Okay.
Right about where they work, right behind the chimney stack. Yes, sir.
Where do we stand with the one on Cross Street? Is that...
One on Cross Street, again, I've deemed an imminent hazard. I've fenced off a lane on Cross Street, and I'm now looking to get everybody at the table so that we can find a solution. We've looked at funding from the state, emergency funding, but again, until we own the property, we cannot get funding. So we're between a rock and a hard place on that one. So I've got to get everybody at the table, formulate a master plan, and then move forward with that with everybody's approval.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay. Let's see, where are we?
6.
Back to the, haven't we done
Back
that
to
several
these
times?
again, yeah.
Okay, it's the re-notification of the amendment to the purchase and sales agreement.
So this is Leonard Street again. They've extended the purchase and sale agreement, and as part of that, we need you to vote again not to exercise your right of first refusal.
Okay.
And Conservation has already sent you a notice that's in your packet that they
Right, I did see that.
they agree with that.
Okay. So, that being the case, first, Chair will entertain a motion to not exercise our right of first refusal on 19 Leonard Street, Lot 11-66.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And Chair will entertain a motion to not exercise our right of first refusal on 235 East Main Street, Lot 11-32, 0 Leonard Street, Lot 11-22, 0 Leonard Street, Lot 11-25, 0 Leonard Street, Lot 11-25-01.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Now, review and vote to award the Surgeon contract for FY '20 DPW supplies.
You have a three-page schedule to show you the bids for DPW supplies as approved by Sursage, and I would recommend that the board vote to approve and sign the bid.
Anyone have any questions? Seeing none, Chair will entertain a motion to award the fiscal '20 DPW supplies contract as outlined in the document supplied by Surgeon.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And now we're rebidding the
Yep.
chemicals for the water department.
There were two, two of the chemicals were rebid, and actually, the bids that came in this time were lower than the previous time, so it was well worth it. And so the two bids here are sodium hypochlorite 15% solution and sodium hypochlorite 15% solution by tank truck, and the first one is 55-gallon drums.
Why did they rebid? Do you know?
They rebid because one of the bidders, who actually was the low bid, had a technical error in their bid,
Okay,
and so they rebid the whole thing again.
okay. Chair will entertain a motion to award the bid for the FY '20 water sewer treatment chemicals to NBC Distributors of Fairhaven, Massachusetts, as indicated on the bid sheet.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And now, discussion on the purchase of Microsoft Surface Pros for the Board of Selectmen meetings.
I just wanted to bring that up again and see if that's something that the board thinks you might be interested in, instead of having all this paperwork at every meeting, going to Surface Pros, and everything would be digital. You wouldn't have to worry about paper. I did get a quote from our consultants to purchase the Surface Pros and put all the necessary licenses and programs that you would need. To purchase 6 of them would be $8,747.94.
Any discussion?
I mean, I think it's time. Beats shuffling through all this paper and
You have problems shuffling through this?
I can't tell you how much paper I've touched in the 12 years I've been on Finance Committee, and it's, I do think it's probably time.
Okay. Anyone else?
Well, for what it's worth, I just think that's a lot of money. $8,000.
It is. I mean, I don't know if an iPad would be a better solution. I don't know why the Surface Pro is it seems a little bit,
I mean, I'm all for,
overkill.
absolutely all for getting rid of the paper, absolutely, absolutely, but I just think that,
But you'd like to look at it anyways.
oh, yeah, we're
Yeah.
not voting
Okay,
tonight?
No.
No, not voting
no,
to
no,
do it
no.
tonight, just
For-
to evaluate it,
yeah,
yeah.
For different options.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
You know, if it works for us, I'm sure the FinCom, if there's another board, if we can get a volume discount or something, you know, so we can eliminate a lot more paper.
And just while we're discussing it, would there be an advantage, being tech savvy as I am, would there be an advantage to, like a Microsoft type program or something like that, to interact with town hall software, or is there, do you know what I'm saying? Are they going to talk to each other? In other words, is it going to create more work to load it onto?
No, whatever we get, most of the stuff would probably download it into like Dropbox, which can go on either.
Okay.
And we would, we wouldn't have, they wouldn't have to have a ton of things on them, just enough so you can have Dropbox and maybe get emails and something like that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Would it be possible for us to do a bring your own device type thing? You know, I've got an iPad where we could just get a download, or does that complicate things?
Well, the only thing with that is then your device becomes a public record.
Oh, yeah, forget that.
Yeah, no, I think it's worth pursuing.
Yeah, I'll get different options and we'll keep looking at it.
Okay. If I knew it was that easy. Okay. Discussion on town hall hours for the 4th of July holiday. Mike had reached out to me like a week or so ago that he had polled the town hall employees, and where the Friday, the 5th, is a half-day, that the employees would be willing to use their vacation time to make it a long weekend. He felt that, we've done it in the past, like when Christmas or New Year's happens to fall on the end, like on a Thursday. And this way here, he feels it'd be a day that probably would not be of high demand anyways. And on a bright spot, it's kind of a way of having everybody take some vacation time when it's convenient for us. So he approached me, I thought it was a good idea, and asked him to put it on the agenda. So,
Makes sense to me.
yeah, if there's no discussion, then Chair will entertain a motion to allow the town hall to be closed on Friday, July 5th, with the town hall employees using their vacation time.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Was that a yes or a no, Mary, or you're not
That's a
sure?
yes.
Okay.
Quiet, yes.
Okay. That's only because Bob Kimball had been here earlier in the night. You were afraid he was going to zap you, right? Okay. Mr. Conway had asked that we put a discussion on host community agreements for retail marijuana establishments. Mr. Units?
I think you have in your packet, Copeland and Page's standard host community agreement. So if a company did come forward, you can take your time, and obviously, we don't have someone right now. You could take your time and review this, and we could put on a future agenda with any questions that you might have, or that I can get to the attorneys, any issues that you might have.
And due to bylaw, any retail establishment would be restricted still to industrially zoned.
Correct.
Land.
Industrial by special permit, that's what I had seen.
Right.
There have been discussions about amending that to include more areas. Do we know if that's?
That would require a town meeting vote, but I don't think anybody's come forward looking, and in my opinion, which isn't worth much usually, especially with the Leonard Street property, where they're going to have the smaller, I assume there are retail buildings up along 123, that would be industrially zoned. I would think that that would be ideal location for such an establishment. So it's not like we're having them go out into the woods. But, I mean, yeah, there's nothing that says we can't look at it in the future, but to the best of my knowledge, we haven't been approached by anyone to put such a facility in.
Okay. Have we done any outreach? As I know, there's, just reading through what's going on in North Attleboro, they had 13 interested parties, only 6 were awarded either licenses or allowed to move forward. So to me, that's 7 potential folks that were at least in the community next door that might be interested. I know Mansfield has recently approved something I think is going in or around Mansfield Crossing. So they're starting to pop up nearby, and my concern is if this is something we want to pursue, then we might be falling behind our surrounding communities.
And I don't know, I'm not aware of pursuing, I don't know if that would be something that would be into the Economic Development Commission, or...
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's something that would be brought up at their next meeting, possibly.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we can take the boilerplate agreement under advisement and read it through, and if there's any questions, get back clarification.
Okay. So is the process that if there was an interested establishment that wanted to come to town, we would negotiate a host community agreement with them, and then it would go to the various committees for approval? I'm just not sure how the phasing works.
You would do the host community agreement, and if they need a special permit, they have to go through the planning board for that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Not a problem.
And I was surprised to hear from some of the towns today that have executed agreements. It's taking 2 years, once a company says they want to get a license through the state, it's been taking them
2 years.
2 years to get approved.
Wow.
It's been getting longer and longer. And something you might want to think about, we don't have anything, I don't think, limiting the number, so I didn't know if that was something you might want to think of at some point.
So would that be probably in Mr. Giuseppe's purview as planning with that bylaw in place?
Anything else? Old business, the town council opinion, the charter review committee. Has everyone seen the opinion, which basically says we might not have to do it? So, I'm glad we asked the question.
Yep.
And I think the answer has changed, just like the answer on how to cancel the election. It all depends on circumstances. So, I know now Mr. Gouhier will be very relieved that he doesn't have to worry about it, because with the commission in operation, we are not going to be forced to name a committee to review the charter.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mike, would it be possible for you just to get this opinion sent over to Laura Parker, the chairman, so that they know that this came in? And because that was a question on Monday night, right? They were concerned about which way we'd be going. So just so that they know, we won't be appointing.
Okay.
But we don't have to take a vote on that, right? We just
No.
don't, no action.
Yeah, no. I mean, basically, I brought it up. I was terrified, and I watched myself bring it up on the videotape, and it sounded like I was more for it than the fact that I was actually bringing it up just because I didn't want it to fall through the cracks. And so at least now we got the answer we needed. And we can take that one thing and scratch it off our list of things to do. Okay, town manager's report.
Just want to announce, thank to the good work of the Recreation Commission and the Recreation Director. We've received a grant of $1,900.80 for the Healthy Summer Youth Jobs Grant Program. And that'll be used to help defray the cost of the lifeguards at the pool this summer. And every little bit's helpful. I just wanted to make you aware, we did receive a notice from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey that they will be going around Bristol County, I don't know if they'll be coming in Norton, but if someone comes around to your home and is doing a survey, the National Center for Health Statistics, it's part of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, is conducting a major study of the health of persons living in the United States. Bristol County, Massachusetts has been randomly selected as one of the survey locations during the current National Health and Nutrition Exam Survey. So if someone receives a survey and it is legit, and I just want to make people aware of that. Just wanted to update you that the generator has been installed at the Council on Aging, and like to thank our state legislators for their help in that. This was paid for through a legislative earmark, and one of the things that was identified in the MVP is now done, so we're moving forward. And I just want to make people in town aware that Serpent, as part of the master plan, is doing drone imaging of the town. So if people see a drone flying around, they'll be working on that for another week or so, and there'll be that they can use that for 3D imaging and everything. So it's pretty impressive, and we appreciate all the time and effort that Serpent puts in here. Just to give you an update, there was a meeting of the Alternative Transportation Committee this week, and the engineer from Bader was also present. So just to give you an update on the project from that meeting, according to Bader's schedule, they show that they're on track to be ready for 2021. The design exception report was approved by MassDOT last month. MassDOT will be scheduling a public hearing, an information meeting early in August, more than likely at the library community room. So that meeting will be run by MassDOT and will be advertised, and we'll let people be aware of that meeting. The Mansfield, that will be for Norton and Mansfield that will be here. And I know there was talk at the last meeting about sending letters with discussion on why out to 2022, and the engineer's suggestion is that might not be the best step right now. The best step where things just keep moving forward, and things change all the time, so they're on the timeline for 2021. Other projects could drop off in the meantime. Happens all the time, so just keep going. And I suggested to the Alternative Transportation Committee that they could send letters to the state reps, just informing them of where they are in the process and how everything's going, and then later on, if we do need some assistance, then reach out. But right now, the engineer said the best step is just to keep working with the MPO at Serped, at their monthly meetings, keep the project in their vision so it keeps moving forward. The main focus right now is the title search on the railroad bed. So right now, the attorney for the MFN is going back and researching the title, so going back to the 1800s when the railroad took title. Just the reason is to make sure that the railroad sometimes took title, and sometimes they just took the rights to lay track. So the state wants to make sure that the railroad actually took title. Mansfield, when they took the easement, was under that assumption, so now the state is looking for them to produce backup for that. That could be one of the reasons the state said pushed it out to 2022. So hopefully the attorney will get that back to us as quick as possible.
What's that?
That's it.
Selectmen's report and mail. Flaherty?
So first of all, I'd like to wish everybody a happy and safe 4th of July. Secondly, I've been a little disappointed with the exchange between Mr. Stefanelli as a result of his question to Mr. Conway tonight. And it doesn't sit well with me, and it's making me second guess my support for the nomination, and was interested to see if the board may want to make a motion for reconsideration and maybe couch it to a future meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I actually agree 100% with Mr. Flaherty. I believe I gave Mr. Stefanelli the benefit of the doubt tonight, and I believe that his behavior after we took the vote was just a little bit outrageous, a bit of a personal attack. And if we can't reconsider the vote tonight, reconsider it to another time, or take a vote tonight to just abolish the position completely.
I'm not sure. Well, I would assume the vote was on the agenda, so I can't see why you couldn't reconsider.
Then I make a motion. I make a motion that we reconsider the appointment of Ralph Stefanelli as the alternate member to the SERPID committee.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So now I make a motion that we do not appoint Mr. Stefanelli as an alternate member to the SERPID committee.
Just a point of order, I've always been told, I don't know, or I've always been of the opinion that you don't make negative motions. I would say the motion should be that you move to appoint him, and then in your vote, you would vote no. Because I'm not sure exactly where that comes from, but that's something that's, in my mind, has always been drilled into me, is that you don't make a negative.
Right. Yeah, we never did that either.
So
So moved.
Chair will entertain a motion to approve the appointment of Ralph Stefanelli as the alternate to SERPID.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, so I do also feel that when discussing something like this, the person should be able to be here. I think Ralph left a little while ago. So I think because it's an alternate position, I don't think we're in any urgency to do so. So to be, fair, I think we should table this to a future meeting.
Okay.
Anyone?
All those in favor of tabling this to a future meeting indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Flaherty?
No.
Mr. Conway?
I'm good for today.
No,
Just, yeah.
Chairman.
And I've already gone too far, so. Warrants and minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve payroll warrant PR 19-26 for the week ended June 15th, 2019. Warrant dated June 20th, 2019, in the amount of $4,196,484.26.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I would entertain a motion to approve invoice warrant AP 19-51 dated June 20th, 2019, in the amount of $802,749.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I will entertain a motion to approve invoice warrant AP 1951-123 dated June 21st, 2019, in the amount of $102,400.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, just under, as an explanation, that is for all the, at our last meeting, we signed the document for the easements for the 123. This is to make the payments. That entire warrant is the payments for the easements along 123 from Elm Street to 495. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I would entertain a motion to approve invoice warrant AP 19-52 dated June 27th, 2019, in the amount of $193,031.07.
So moved.
Second.
And usually on these, about the only outstanding item on this was, I believe it was approximately $50,000 was Chapter 90 highway funds. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now, minutes for June 13th, 2019, both the open session and the executive session were sent. Has everyone had a chance to read them? If so, Chair will entertain a motion to approve the open meeting warrant, minutes of June 13th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And Chair will entertain a motion to entertain, will entertain a motion to approve the executive session minutes for June 13, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
I wasn't there. Can't
And I
remember.
wasn't. So, but,
But we determined.
you know
that.
what, I can still vote. So, I'll vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah, we had gotten.
We got opinion of council.
Opinion previous that. And,
Tab, do you have, in case, the motion?
yeah, don't point at me. You got it?
Yep. Good to get a hand back to me.
Okay. I declare under General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21B, 3 and 4, that the purpose of the executive session will be to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Next Sun Energy, LLC, versus Fernandez et al., Town of Norton Planning Board, Land Court Number 19, miscellaneous 000230-RBF. Because discussion of the strategy in open session could compromise the purpose of the executive session, and with the board not to return to open session at the conclusion of the executive session.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board go into executive session under General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, for the purposes and reasons declared by the chairman and with the board not to return to open session thereafter.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Steele?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Farris?
Yes.
I also vote yes. So we're all set, Shane. Thank you.